Come to the reading of the third night of A Thousand Nights and One Night. Today we finish up with the story of the third Shaykh and go a little bit further. So here we go. And when it was the third night, and the king had had his will of the wazir's daughter, Dunyazad, her sister, said to her, "Finish for us that tale of thine." And she replied, "With joy and goodly gree, it hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when the third old man told a tale to the Jinni, more wondrous than the two precedings, the Jinni marveled with exceeding marvel, and shaking with delight cried, Lo, I have given thee the remainder of the merchant's punishment, and for thy sake have I released him." Thereupon the merchant embraced the old man and thanked them all, and these shocks wished him joy on being saved, and fared forth each one for his own city. Yet this tale is not more wondrous than that of the fisherman's story. Asked the king, "What is this fisherman's story?" And she answered by relating the tale of the fisherman and the Jinni. "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that there was a fisherman, well stricken in years, who had a wife and 3 children, and withal was of poor condition. Now it was his custom to cast his net every day 4 times, and no more. On a day he went forth about noontide to the seashore, where he laid down his basket, and tucking up his shirt and plunging into the water, made a cast with his net, and waited till it settled to the bottom. Then he gathered the cords together and hauled it away at it, but found it weighty. And however much he drew it landwards, he could not pull it up. So he carried the ends ashore and drove a stake into the ground and made the net fast to it. Then he stripped and he dived into the water all, all the way in until he met the net, and it was fast. And he left not working hard until he had brought it up. He rejoiced thereat, and donning his clothes, went to the net, where he found in it a dead jackass, which had torn the meshes. Now when he saw it, he exclaimed in his grief, "There is no majesty, and there is no might, save in Allah the glorious and the great." Then quoth he, "This is a strange manner of daily bread." And he began reciting in extant verses. O toiler, through the glooms of night in peril and in pain, thy toiling stint for daily bread comes not by might and main. Seest thou not the fisher seek afloat upon the sea his bread, while glimmer stars of night as set in tangled skein? Anon he plungeth in despite the buffet of the waves, the while to sight the bellying net his eager glances strain, till joying of the night's success, a fish he bringeth home, whose gullet by the hook of fate was caught and cut in twain. When buys that fish of him a man who spent the hours of night, reckless of cold and wet and gloom, in ease and comfort fain? Laud to the Lord who gives to this, to that denies his wishes, and dooms one toil and catch the prey, and other eats the fishes. Then quoth he, "Up and to it. I am sure of his beneficence. Inshallah." So he continued, "When thou art seized of evil fate, assume the noble soul's long suffering, 'tis thy best. Complain not to the creature. This is be plain, from one most ruthful to the ruthlessness." The fisherman, when he had looked at the dead ass, got it free of the toils and wrung out and spread his net. And then he plunged into the sea, saying, "In Allah's name," and made a cast and pulled at it, but it grew heavier and settled down more firmly than the first time. Now he thought that there were fish in it, and he made it fast, and doffing his clothes, went into the water, and dived and hailed until he drew it upon the dry land. Then he found he in it a large earthen pitcher, which was full of sand and mud. And seeing this, he was greatly troubled, and began repeating these verses. "Forbear, O troubles of the world, and pardon as ye nil forbear. I went to seek my daily bread. I find that breadless I must fare. For neither handcraft brings me aught, nor fate allots to me a share. How many fools the Pleiades reach, while darkness whelms the wise and ware. So he prayed pardon of Allah, and throwing away the jug, wrung his net, and cleansed it, and returned to the sea the third time to cast his net, and waited till it had sunk. Then he pulled at it, and found therein potsherd and broken glass, whereupon he began to speak of these verses. He is to thee that daily bread that canst nor loose nor bind, nor pen nor write avail thee aught thy daily bread to find. For joy and daily bread are what fate deigneth to allow. This soil is sad and sterile ground, while that makes glad the hind. The shafts of time and life bear down full many a man of wrath, which beareth up the hind degrees wits of ignoble mind. So, come thou, death, for verily life is not worth a straw, when lo the falcon falls with all the mallard wings the wind. No wonder 'tis thou seest how the great of soul and mind are poor, and many of loosel care to height of luck designed. The bird shall overfly the world from east to furthest west, and that shall win her every wish, though ne'er she leave the nest. Then, raising his eyes heavenwards, he said, O my God, verily thou wottest that I cast not my net each day save 4 times. The third is done, and as yet thou hast forsaked me nothing. So this time, O my Dane, give me my daily bread. Then, having called on Allah's name, he again threw his net and waited its sinking and settling, whereupon he hailed at it, but could not draw it up, for that it was entangled at the bottom. He cried out in vexation, There is no majesty and there is no might save in Allah. And he began reciting, Fie on this wretched world, and so it be. I must be whelmed by grief and misery. Though gladsome be man's lot when dawns the morn, he drains the cup of woe ev he see. Yet was I one of whom the world, when asked, Whose lot is happiest, oft would say, "'Tis he." Thereupon he stripped, and diving down to the net, busied himself with it till it came to land. Then he opened the meshes, and found therein a cucumber-shaped jar of yellow copper, evidently full of something, whose mouth was made fast with a leaden cap, stamped with the seal ring of our Lord Suleiman, son of David, all except the twain. Seeing this, the fisherman rejoiced and said, If I sell it in the brass bazaar, 'tis worth 10 golden dinars. He shook it, and finding it heavy, continued, Would to heaven I knew what was herein! But I must and will open it and look at its content, and store it in my bag, and sell it in the mass market. Taking out a knife, he worked at the lead till he had loosened it from the jar. Then he laid the cup on the ground, and shook the vase to pour out whatever might be inside. He found nothing in it, whereat he marveled with exceeding marvel. But presently there came forth from the jar a smoke which spired heavenwards into the ether, whereat he began to marvel with mighty marvel, and which trailed along the earth's surface till presently, having reached its full height, the thick vapor condensed and became an Ifrit, huge of bulk, whose crest touched the clouds, with his feet were on the ground. His head was as a dome, his hands like pitchforks, his legs long as masts, and his mouth big as a cave. His teeth were like large stones, his nostrils ewers, his eyes 2 lamps, and his look was fierce and lowering. Now when the fisherman saw that the Ifrit had side muscles quivered, his teeth chattered, his spittle dried up, and he became blind about what to do. Upon this, the Ifrit looked at him and cried, There is no God but the God, and Suleiman is the prophet of God. Presently added, O apostle of Allah, slay me not. Never again will I gainsay thee in word, nor sin against thee in deed. Quoth the fisherman, O Madrid, didst thou say Suleiman, the apostle of Allah? And Suleiman is dead some 1,008 years ago, and we are now in the last days of the world. What is thy story, and what is thy account of thyself, and what is this cause of thy entering into the Kirkabit? Now when the evil spirit heard the words of the fisherman, quoth he, There is no God but the God. Be of good cheer, O fisherman. Quoth the fisherman, Why biddest thou me to be of good cheer? And he replied, Because of thy having to die an ill death in this very hour. Said the fisherman, Thou deservest for thy good tidings the withdrawal of heaven's protection, O thou distant one. Wherefore shouldst thou kill me, and what thing have I done to deserve death? I who have freed thee from the jar, and saved thee from the depths of the sea, and brought thee up on the dry land. Replied the Ifrit, Ask of me only what mode of death thou wilt die, and by what manner of slaughter shall I slay thee? Rejoined the fisherman, What is my crime, and wherefore such retribution? Quoth the Ifrit, Hear my story, O fisherman. And he answered, Say on, be brief in thy saying, for of very sooth my life breath is in my nostrils. Thereupon quoth the Jinni, Know that I am one among the heretical Jan, and I sinned against Suleiman, David's son, O the twain be peace. I, together with the famous Shaykh al-Jinni, whereupon the Prophet sent his minister, Asaph, son of Bakra, to seize me, and this wazir brought me against my will, and led me in bonds to him, I being downcast, despite my nose. And he placed me standing before him like a suppliant. When Suleiman saw me, he took refuge with Allah, and bade me embrace the true faith and obey his behest. But I refused, so sending for this Kirkabit. He shut me up therein, and stopped it over with lead, whereupon he impressed the Most High name, and gave his orders to the Jan, who carried me off, and cast me into the midmost of the ocean. And there I abode 100 years, during which I said in my heart, Whoso shall release me, him will I enrich for ever and ever. But the full century went by, and when Noah set me free, I entered upon the second 50, saying, Whoso shall release me from here, I will open the hordes of the earth. Still, no one set me free, and thus 400 years passed away. Then quoth I, Whoso shall release me, for him will I fulfill 3 wishes. Yet no one set me free. Thereupon I waxed wroth with exceeding wrath, and said to myself, Whoso shall release me from this time forth, him will I slay, and I will give him choice of what death he will die. And now as thou hast released me, I give thee 3 choices of deaths. The fisherman, hearing the words of the Ifrit, said, Oh, Allah, the wonder of it! It that I have come to free thee, save it in these days. Spare my life, so Allah spare thine, and slay me not, lest Allah set one to slay thee. Replied this one, There is no help for it. Die thou must. So ask me by way of boon what manner of death thou wilt die. Albeit thus certified, the fisherman again addressed the Ifrit, saying, Forgive me this my death as a generous reward for having freed thee. And the Ifrit, Surely I would not slay thee save on account of that same release. O chief of the Ifrits, said the fisherman, I did thee good, and thou requitest me with evil. In thy very sooth the old saw lieth not when it saith, We wrought thee well. They met our well with ill. Such but my life is every bad man's labor. To him whose benefit unworthy wits shall hap what hap to Unaman's Amir's neighbors. Now, when the Ifrit heard these words, he answered, No more of these talks, needs must I kill thee. Upon this, the fisherman said to himself, This is a Jinni, and I am a man to whom Allah hath given a passable cunning wit. So I will now cast about to compass his destruction by my own contrivance and by my own intelligence, even as he took counsel only of his malice and his frowardness. He began by asking the Ifrit, "Hast thou indeed resolved to kill me?" and receiving for all answer, "Even so," he cried. "Now in the most great name graven on the seal ring of Solomon the son of David, peace within the holy twain, and I question thee on a certain matter, wilt thou give me a true answer?" And the Ifrit, he replied, "Yea." But hearing mention of the most great name, his wits were troubled, and he said with trembling, "Ask and be brief." Quoth the fisherman, "How didst thou fit into this bottle, which would not hold thy hand, no, not even thy foot, and how came it to be large enough to contain the whole of thee?" Replied the Ifrit, "What, dost not believe that I was in there?" And the fisherman rejoined, "Nay, I will never believe it until I see it inside my own eyes." And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Her sister said to her, "Please finish us this tale, and not be so sleepy." So she resumed, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when the fisherman said to the Ifrit, 'I will never in no wise believe thee until I see thee inside it with mine own eyes,' the evil spirit on the instant shook, and became a vapor which condensed and entered into the jar a little and a little, till all was well inside, when lo! the fisherman in hot haste took the leaden cap with the seal and stoppered it therewith the mouth of the jar, and called out to the Ifrit, saying, 'Ask me by way of boon what death thou wilt die. By Allah, I will throw thee into the sea before us. Here will I build me a lodge, and whoso cometh hither, I will warn him against fishing, and will say, In these waters abideth an Ifrit, who giveth us a last favor of choices of deaths, and fashion of slaughter to the man who saveth him.'" Now, when the Ifrit heard from this the fisherman, and saw him in limbo, he was minded to escape, but this was prevented by Solomon's seal. So he knew that the fisherman had cozied and outwitted him, and he waxed slowly and submissive, and began humbly to say, "I did but jest with thee," but with other answers. "Thou liest, O vilest of Ifrits, and meanest and filthiest." And he set off with the bottle for the seaside. And the Ifrit called out, "Nay, nay!" And he called out, "I, I!" Thereupon the evil spirit softened his voice and smoothed his speech, and abased himself, saying, "What wouldest thou to do with me, O fisherman?" "I will throw thee back into the sea," he answered, "where thou hast been housed and home for 1,800 years, and now I will leave thee therein till judgment day. Did I not say to thee, Spare me, Allah shall spare thee? And did I not say to thee, Allah will slay thee? Yet thou spurnest my supplication, and hast no intention save to deal ungraciously by me. And Allah hath now thrown thee into the hands, and I am cunninger than you." Quoth the Ifrit, "Open for me, and I may bring thee weal." Quoth the fisherman, "Thou liest, thou accursed! My case with thee is that of the wazir of King Yunan and the sage Duban. And who was the wazir of King Yunan? And who was the sage of Duban? And what was the story about them?" Quoth the Ifrit, whereupon the fisherman began to tell the tale of the wazir and the sage Duban. "Now, O thy Ifrit, that in days of yours, in ages long gone, before King Yunan reigned over the city of Fars of the land of Rome, he was a powerful ruler and a wealthy who had armies and guards and allies of all nations of men. But his body was afflicted with leprosy, which leeches and men of science failed to heal. He drank potions, he swallowed powders, he used unguents, but naught did him good, and none among the host of physicians availed to procure him a cure. At last there came to his city a mighty healer of men, and one well stricken in years, the sage Duban. This man was a reader of books, Greek, Persian, Roman, Arabian, and Syrian, and he was skilled in astronomy and in leechcraft, the theory as well as the practice. He was experienced in all that healed and that hurteth the body, conversant with the virtues of every plant, grass, and herb, and their benefit and bane. And he understood philosophy, and had compassed the whole range of medical science and other branches of the knowledge tree. Now this physician passed but few days in the city ere he heard of the king's malady, and all his bodily sufferings through the leprosy with which Allah had smitten him, and how all the doctors and wise men had failed to heal him. Upon this he sat upon the night in deep thought, and when broke the dawn, and appeared the morn, and light was again born, and the sun greeted the good, whose beauty this world adorn, he donned his handsomest dress, and going to the king Yunan, he kissed the ground before him, and then he prayed for the endurance of his honor and prosperity in fairest language, and made himself known, saying, O king, tidings have reached me of what befell thee, though that which is in thy person, and how the host of physicians have proved themselves unavailing to abate it. And lo, I can cure thee, O king, and yet will I not make thee drink of draught or anoint thee with ointment. Now, when King Yunan heard these words, he said in a huge surprise, How wilt thou do this? By Allah, if thou make me whole, I will enrich thee even to thy son's son, and I will give thee sumptuous gifts, and whatso thou wishest shall be thine, and thou shalt be to me a co-companion and a friend. The king then robed him with a dress of honor, and entreated him graciously, and asked him, Canst thou indeed cure me of this complaint without drug and unguent? And he answered, Yes, I will heal thee without pains and penalties of medicine. The king marveled with exceeding marvel, and said, O physician, when shall this be with all thou speakest, and how many days shall it take place? Haste thee, O my son. He replied, I hear and obey. The cure shall begin tomorrow. So saying, he went forth from the presence, and hired himself a house in the city for better storage of his books and scrolls, his medicines and aromatics. Then he set to work at choosing the fittest drugs and simples. He fashioned a bat, hollow within and furnished with a handle without, for which he made a ball, the two being prepared with consummate art. On the next day, when both were ready for use, and wanting nothing more, he went up to the king, and kissing the ground between his hands, bade him ride forth on the parade ground, there to play at the pall and mall. He was accompanied by his suite, emirs and chamberlains, wazirs and lords of the realm, and ere he was seated, the sage Duban came up to him, and handing him the bat, said, Take this maul and grip it as I do, so, and now push for the plain, and leaning well over thy horse, drive the ball, and all thy might, until thy palm be moist and thy body perspire. Then the medicine will penetrate through thy pain, and will permeate thy person. When thou hast done with playing, and thou feelest the effects of the medicine, return to thy palace, and make the gush oblation in the Hammam bath, and lay thee down to sleep. So shalt thou become whole, and now peace be with thee. Thereupon King Yunan took the bat from the sage, and grasped it firmly. Then mounting steed, he drove the ball before him, and galloped after it till it reached it, when he struck it with all his might, his palm gripping the bat handle the while, and he ceased not mauling the ball till the hand waxed moist, and his skin perspiring imbibed the medicine from the wood. Then the sage Duban knew that the drug had penetrated his person, and bade him return to the palace, and enter into the Hammam without stay or delay. So King Yunan forthwith returned, and ordered them to clear for him the bath. They did so, the carpet spreaders making all haste, and the slaves all hurry, and got ready a change of raiment for the king. He entered the bath, and made the total ablution long and thoroughly, then donned his clothes with the Hammam, and rode therefore to the palace, where he lay down and slept. Such was the case with King Yunan, but as regards the sage Duban, he returned home and slept as usual, and when morning dawned, he repaired to the palace and craved audience. The king ordered him to be admitted. Then, having kissed the ground between his hands, in allusion to the king, he recited these couplets with solemn intonation. Happy is eloquence when thou art named her sire, but mourns she wherein others man's the title claimed. O Lord of the fairest presence, whose illuming rays clear off the fogs of doubt our veiling deeds high famed. Ne'er cease thy face to shine like dawn and rise of morn, and never show time's space with heat of ire inflamed. Thy grace hath favored us with the gifts worth such wise as rain clouds raining on the hills by worlds inframed. Freely thou lavished thy wealth to rise on high, till won from the time the heights whereat thy grounder aimed. Now, when the sage ceased reciting, the king rose quickly to his feet and fell on his neck. Then, seating him by his side, he bade dress him in a sumptuous dress. For it had so happened that when the king left the Hammam, he looked on his body and saw no trace of leprosy. The skin was as clean as virgin silver. He joyed thereat, and exceedingly joy. His breast broadened with delight, and he felt thoroughly happy. Presently, when it was full day, he entered his audience hall and sat upon the throne of his kingship, whereupon his chamberlains and grandees flocked to the presence with them with the sage Duban. Seeing the leech, the king rose to him in honor and seated him by his side. Then the food trays, furnished with the daintiest yeads, were brought, where the physician ate with the king, nor did he cease accompanying him all that day. Moreover, at nightfall, he gave the physician Duban 2,000 gold pieces, besides the unusual dress of honor and other gifts galore, and sent him home on his own steed. After the sage had fared forth, King Yunan again expressed his amazement at the leech's art, saying, This man medicined my body from without, nor anointed me with aught of ointments. By Allah, surely this is none other than consummate skill. I am bound to honor such a man with rewards and distinction, and take him to my companion and my friend during the remainder of my days. So King Yunan passed the night in joy and gladness, for that his body had been made whole and had thrown off the pernicious of malady. On the morrow, the king went forth from his seraglio and sat upon his throne with the lords of the state, stood about him, and the emirs and the wazirs sat as with it their wont on the right hand and on his left. Then he asked for the sage Duban, who came in and kissed the ground before him. When the king rose to greet him, and seating him by his side, ate with him and wished him long life. Moreover, he robed him and gave him gifts, and ceased not conversing with him until night approached. Then the king ordered him, by way of salary, 5 dresses of honor and 1,000 dinars. The physician returned to his own house, full of gratitude to the king. Now, when the next morning dawned, the king repaired to his audience hall, and his lords and nobles surrounded him, and his chamberlains, and his ministers, as the white enclosed the black of his eye. Now the king had a wazir among his wazirs, unsightly to look upon, an ill-omened spectacle, sordid, ingenious, placed evil with an evil will. Now when the minister saw the king place the physician near him, and gave him all of these gifts, it jealoused him, and he planned to do him harm, as in the saying on such subject, envy lurks in every body, and the saying, oppression hideth in every heart, and power revealeth it, and weakness concealeth it. Then the minister came before the king, and kissing the ground between his hands, said, O King of the age and all time, thou who is wise benefits I have grown up manhood. I have weighty advice to offer thee, and if I withhold it, I were a son of adultery and new true-born man. Wherefore, and thou order me to disclose it, I will so do forthwith. Quoth the king, who was troubled at the words of his minister, And what is this counsel of thine? Quoth, O glorious monarch, The wise of old have said, whoso regardeth not the end hath no fortune to friend. And indeed, I have lately seen the king on far other than the right side, for he lavished largesse on his enemy, on one whose object is the decline and fall of his kingship. To this man he has shown favor, honoring him with over honor and making him an intimate. Wherefore I fear for the king's life. The king, who was much troubled and changed color, and asked, whom dost thou suspect, and what dost thou hint? The minister answered, O king, and thou be asleep? Wake up! I point to the physician Duban. Rejoined the king, fie upon thee! This is a true friend, who is favored by me above all men, because he cured me with something which I held in my hand, and he healed my leprosy, which has baffled all physicians. Indeed, he is one whose like may be found in these days. No, not in the whole world, from the furthest east to utmost west. And it is of such man that thou sayest such hard things. Now, from this day forward, I allot him a settled sold and allowances every month, 1,000 gold pieces, and were I to share with him my realm, 'twere but a little matter. Perforce, I must suspect that thou speakest on this wise from mere envy and jealousy, as they relate to the king Sinbad. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased saying her permitted say. Then quoth Dunyazad, O my sister, how pleasant is thy tale, how tasteful, how sweet, and how grateful. She replied, and where is this compared with what I could tell thee on the coming night, if the king deigns spare my life? Then said to the king by himself, by Allah, I will not slay her till I hear the rest of the tale, for truly it is wondrous. So they rested that night in mutual embrace until the dawn. Then the king went forth to his hall of rule, and the wazir and the troops came in, and the audience chamber was thronged, and the king gave orders, and judged, and appointed, and deposed, and bade, and forbade during the rest of that day, till the court broke up, and King Shah returned to his palace. And now we must wait till tomorrow for another night.